Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode number 8. And we're answering all of your Q&A questions. A couple of weeks ago, we polled our Instagram followers to learn about their burning questions in regards to their gut and hormones. We got a lot of really great questions, and we're excited to share them with you. We actually got so many that we're already going to do a round 2 Q&A episode coming up. So if you are not following us on Instagram and you would love to have all of your questions answered, follow us at Your Body Has Your Back on Instagram and keep an eye out for our polls because we want to hear your questions and help you, our community, get the answers you need to better support your health. That's why we do what we do. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jilly to answer our first Q&A question.
All right, so let's dive in. Question number 1 was, are you able to reverse PCOS or just manage? I absolutely love this question and feel like this can actually be applied a lot more broadly, honestly, to a variety of conditions and symptoms that people might deal with. But specific to PCOS, I want to point out right off the bat that PCOS is not a disease. PCOS is a syndrome, and this means that it basically involves a collection or a constellation of different symptoms. These symptoms are driven by different imbalances or dynamics in the body, primarily insulin resistance, adrenal issues, stress, and gut imbalances. So these core drivers of PCOS impact people differently. But the cool thing is that these drivers are highly, highly modifiable, and they are very impacted by things like diet and lifestyle. So once we can understand what dynamics are driving your PCOS symptoms specifically, we can support these things effectively to bring the body back to balance. And when we're talking about things like insulin resistance, we can essentially reverse these things. We can improve cellular sensitivity to insulin, as an example. And really, a word that I like to use in this type of situation better than reverse is remission. So ultimately, we can eliminate PCOS symptoms and we can put PCOS into remission and live life like we do not have this condition. And this sort of speaks to the entire premise of functional medicine, really, which involves understanding. So investigating and understanding the root causes or the drivers that are creating dysfunction in the body. And when we can support those things effectively, we can eliminate symptoms and put, PCOS and a variety of other types of, conditions and disease states into remission.
And the same goes for like IBS or gut symptoms. Very much the same idea, as it's a collection of symptoms, but there's a reason for why we're experiencing those symptoms. There are those underlying dynamics. And in the world of kind of gut and IBS, we have maldigestion, we have inflammation, we have dysbiosis or infection and kind of involving the microbiome. So they might have different root causes as to what's contributing to gut symptoms or hormone symptoms. They have some overlap, certainly, but we're working on the whole body and really working on the lifestyle and the nutrition. And then there might be some targeted approaches once we really understand what are some of those unique pieces to the puzzle for that person, and put those dynamics kind of into remission. And I think the piece about the word remission that I also really like is that if we just go back to exactly what we were doing when we weren't well, when we were feeling sick and experiencing those symptoms and maybe like the kind of the height of it, if that was, we weren't getting outside, we were eating more processed foods, we were, very off in our sleep schedules, we were doing a number of things that were taking away from the balance in our body, we might experience those symptoms again. And we can see those in hormones, we can see those in gut. And that's really why Jilly and I are so obsessed with the foundations, not because, they're not the quick fix, but they are what's going to help you to stay long-term.
100%. And, in terms of staying in remission or keeping those symptoms at bay long-term, the longer you are working at, supporting the foundation and targeting specifics that are relevant for you and your body, the more resilience you will see. And we're not looking for perfection here, right? And you don't have to be perfect 100% of the time to achieve results or to get your body to a place where your PCOS or your IBS is in remission and it is not something that you are thinking about on the day to day. But we are going to always want to bring ourselves back to the foundation. And if you do experience symptoms, don't freak out and feel like, oh my gosh, everything's, kind of all going to come back and I'm going to be dealing with all these symptoms again. At the end of the day, we're all human and we deviate or, we fall off of a habit or a routine, and that's okay. That's good information for us to, kind of bring it back to the basics, make some adjustments and continue supporting the body.
Exactly. Life happens. And when we know how to come back to the foundation, that's what's most important. That question is actually kind of a great interlude into our next question, which is asking about a GI map or advanced testing. Is it worth it for persistent bloating? First or last resort? So just as a little background, a GI map test is a functional stool test that collects information about the status of the gut environment from the stool. And it can be used as a tool to help customize a plan to help eliminate digestive symptoms or understand how the gut might be playing a role in the greater body. But particularly for symptoms, in this case, like persistent bloat, it might give us some information. Now, advanced testing, and a GI map would be in the category of advanced testing, is an amazing tool. But it's not going to be as valuable if we haven't put the fundamentals in place. So, we're broken records over here. And some of the questions that I would want to be asking this person to say, like, fundamentally, are you eating enough? And, are you going to the bathroom every day, 1 to 3 times a day, having a full void? Because sometimes persistent bloat can actually be mild constipation. And mild constipation can potentially be from underfueling and not eating enough from even a physical kind of bulk stool place, but also from kind of hormone dynamics, thyroid dynamics, stress on the body. Are you sleeping enough? We just did a whole episode on sleep. So fundamental. Tune into that to learn more about that. Are you practicing stress balancing tools? Are you working on your circadian rhythm? All of these will have impacts in terms of the function of the gut and the function of the hormones and the function of the body as a whole. So Jillian and I often find ourselves so frustrated when we get a new client who comes to us with loads of functional testing and maybe supplements, but they have had no support from the provider that, kind of prescribed them all of these things or provided them all of these things on the fundamentals. No one's talked to them about what they're eating or how much they're eating or what their lifestyles like. And that really can be, so frustrating when so many of these maybe persistent symptoms can be from the things that we can do in our everyday life. And that is obviously why we've created this podcast, to really help to direct you to how important those fundamentals are and really understand, like, what are the fundamentals. So for this person that asked this question, if you have focused on the fundamentals, and you've done it for a couple of months, because, these things, again, they're not overnight fixes necessarily. And that's sometimes why we dismiss them. And you're still experiencing that frustrating bloat, then that would be maybe a time for a GI map test or exploring kind of functional testing with a provider such as like Jilly or myself. That's where these can really be significant tools to understand when someone's running up to, a glass ceiling. They've kind of maybe improved to a certain point, but they can't quite get themselves to fully eliminate some of the symptoms that are pretty frustrating for them. And that's where these tools are really, really impactful.
I couldn't agree more. And you can also apply this more broadly to really, advanced functional lab tests as a whole. And I think about, the Dutch test in terms of one of the labs that I'm, running a lot in practice in terms of looking at sex hormones, stress hormones. And we have so many women that, come to work with us, like Abby said, that have, done some of this testing and a lot more. And no one has asked them, hey, what are you eating for breakfast? When are you eating breakfast? But also we have women that seek us out for these tests because they suspect hormonal issues. And we love these advanced tests, probably more than most, because we really love data. We love kind of getting into the weeds and really having a deeper understanding of what is going on in an individual's body. But these tests are only so valuable in terms of they're going to be the most valuable when you have worked on those fundamentals. So I don't need an advanced functional lab test to tell me that my client isn't getting enough protein, that their blood sugar's all over the place, that they're not sleeping. And the way that I describe it to clients is that we have to work on the big rocks first. When we work on the big rocks and we put those things in place, pretty much everything that we've covered in this first season so far of the podcast, that is when we are going to get so much clarity around what is your true baseline. And when we do that deeper testing, now we know exactly kind of what we need to support and where we need to dive in and make more kind of targeted adjustments with a higher level of personalization. So I very much agree with Abby in, kind of her thoughts there. And it's not that we don't love the data. It's that, we want to use this in a very smart and effective way. And we're not looking to, run labs, and waste people's time or money. We want to do this in a really methodical way that's going to get people better.
Yeah. And I think to just hit on that last point is, if you're not doing the fundamentals, you could have all the testing in the world and you could take all the supplements in the world and you're not going to see full remission of whatever symptom or dynamic that you want to, heal from. And that's why we're talking about this of, we can throw every supplement and every test, but it's really the fundamentals that are going to take you to the finish line.
100%. So on to our next question here, how to decrease DHT naturally. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background here without trying to go down too much of a rabbit hole here, which we love to do. So for anyone that doesn't know, DHT or dihydrotestosterone is a type of androgen hormone. Androgens are a category or group of hormones that both men and women have, including DHEA, DHEAS, androstenedione, and DHT. Androgen hormones are often associated with male characteristics, but both men and women do have these hormones. And I'm going to kind of be speaking about DHT specific to women because a woman had submitted this question, and this is really most relevant for the work that I am doing and the knowledge that I have in terms of high DHT being problematic and creating, symptoms in the women I work with. So both men and women do have these hormones though. DHT specifically, it is considered the most potent type of androgen. So it is very androgenic. In women, most androgen hormones are going to be produced both in the ovaries and by the adrenal glands. So those same glands that we've talked about that regulate stress hormones. But DHT is specifically produced by your body as a byproduct of testosterone through an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. So DHT is not produced by the ovaries and it is not produced by the adrenal glands like our other androgens. It is made directly from testosterone through the activity of this 5-alpha reductase enzyme. So as I mentioned, DHT, it's a super potent androgen. It has 2 to 3 times the potency of testosterone. So if we have too much DHT, too much of this androgen, it can drive a lot of symptoms of androgen excess. Some of the most common symptoms being things like hirsutism or unwanted hair growth, cystic acne and just acne in general, but often cystic inflammatory acne around the jawline. Also things like anger, irritation, mood swings, irritability, and also male pattern hair loss. Those are kind of some of the classic symptoms associated with too much DHT. These symptoms are commonly thought about in PCOS specifically because women with PCOS do often have elevated androgens and high DHT, but really any woman can have high androgens and high DHT and experience these symptoms even outside of PCOS. So this is really relevant for any of us that have hormones. The really cool thing here is that we know that there are certain things that actually upregulate this 5-alpha reductase enzyme and cause more testosterone to convert into its potent DHT androgen. The activity of this enzyme is sped up or increased by certain genetic variants and also by things like inflammation, stress, and insulin or blood sugar issues. To decrease the activity of this enzyme and to encourage the production of less of that DHT and less potent, androgen metabolites, I typically recommend, of course, focusing on the basics first: blood sugar balance, sleep, nervous system support, all of the key fundamentals that we are, up here, raving about nonstop. So work on those things first. That is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, especially, since I'm mentioning that the big things that create more DHT are, impacted by the fundamentals in a really big way. We can also get a little bit deeper or more nitty gritty with specific interventions. So foods, herbs, supplements, and different things that can lower DHT or block the activity of that 5-alpha reductase enzyme. There are so many different things that you could utilize here, and it would be really important in my mind to understand what exactly is driving up that enzyme and creating more androgenic DHT for you specifically. But these are just, kind of some of the top recommendations that I have that really, kind of anyone could get started with. So after you've kind of built that supportive foundation, generally just increasing antioxidant intake here through higher consumption of, bright, colorful fruits and veggies, herbs, spices. We also did a whole podcast episode 4 on functional foods, which, highlighted things like broccoli sprouts, which really pack a punch from an antioxidant perspective, and with lowering inflammation. Also incorporating more things like fatty fish, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, can lower that 5-alpha reductase enzyme. Incorporating ground flaxseed, incorporating more magnesium-rich foods, and potentially exploring a magnesium supplement. All of those things can be helpful for most people that are, struggling with elevated DHT and the symptoms that, it produces. From a supplement perspective, would always, again, encouraging understanding your root cause, working with a professional, to customize this. But some top supplements that are really effective 5-alpha reductase enzyme inhibitors, that have some good data are things like white peony and licorice. So this is a combination taken together of a combination of herbs. Things like saw palmetto, stinging nettles, EGCG from green tea, reishi, which is really fabulous. And also there's a whole bunch of other ones that could be helpful, but those are some favorites that you could explore. Oh, and lastly, one other thing that I definitely want to mention is spearmint tea specifically. And this is one I actually do encourage clients to incorporate via food in tea form. You could certainly do things supplementally, but there have been some small clinical studies done that have found that drinking anywhere from 2 to 5 cups of spearmint tea daily can really effectively, lower DHT and inhibit that enzyme for improving symptoms. Overall, we might want to do some deeper testing, like the Dutch testing, or the GI map testing, or whatever, we feel might give us more customized data if you have worked through establishing a really solid foundation. You've given that a good amount of time. And, if you're still experiencing those androgenic symptoms, I'd want more data to customize things with the supplements and the specific, functional foods and all of that.
That was a great answer. All right. So our next question, how to support thyroid postpartum. So this is a big topic, and we're absolutely going to be talking about the thyroid in general and kind of in its entirety in a later episode. But we're going to do the best we can in this time. So what's important to know about the thyroid from like a big picture standpoint is that the thyroid ensures safety in the body. So when we're aiming to support the health of the thyroid, we want to be thinking about supporting what makes the body feel safe. This is especially so important in the postpartum period of time, as that time is all about the repletion or the restoration of nutrients that mom gave away during the period of growing the baby, and certainly the greatest athletic performance of her life, giving birth to the baby. And then certainly not to mention too, a major surgery if there was a C-section in terms of delivery processes. So there's a lot of repletion. So when we say safety or repletion for thyroid health, especially in that postpartum period, but we could extend this to anyone working on thyroid health, we mean ensuring that there's optimal calories, ensuring that there's optimal protein levels that are consistent throughout the day, emphasizing nutrient-dense foods. A favorite source of thyroid supportive nutrients is beef liver. You can eat it in its whole form, or you could take it in a supplemental form. Really great. It's almost like a multivitamin of sorts in a food-based form. And we want to be repleting minerals that are often lost in periods of stress and pregnancy and certainly delivery. And if, again, surgery, there's a lot of stress on the body. Beautiful stress, but it's stress nonetheless. And then in that postpartum period too, we might be sleeping less. We might be, now we're in the caring for an infant. So there's also a lot of demand on our bodies. So repleting those minerals, potassium, sodium, magnesium every day would be incredibly helpful, and really just making sure that we are also continuing to support us as women, and the whole focus, obviously on our infant, but also not forgetting about the importance of supporting yourself in those fundamentals. I know it can be a very stressful time. So doing your best and asking for help, I think, is a really important piece. And even for those of us in our communities, really looking to, people in your life, friends, women that that have gone through childbirth recently, reaching out to them to ask if they could use some help, or showing up with food and favors and things like that, really working in community. We also want to highlight the importance of getting a full thyroid test in that postpartum period, definitely by that 6-month postpartum period. And this might require advocating for yourself to get that lab ordering. I would even suggest asking your provider before you give birth about, knowing that you're going to want to have this looked at, just as, a marker of hey, where are you? Where's your thyroid at? And all of that, because the statistics are really that 1 in 6 women develop postpartum thyroiditis. So that's kind of inflammation of the thyroid that can cause thyroid symptoms such as fatigue, weight changes, hair loss, constipation, low energy, certainly can impact mood and depression. So it's a really important marker to just make sure that there's not some extra attention needed to be paid there. And sometimes in that postpartum period, there can be some significant exhaustion, particularly if someone is struggling with thyroid. So advocating for yourself before you even get to that place can be a really great thing to do. And when we say full thyroid panel, we really want to make sure that includes more than just a TSH. So specifically, we would really want to see a TSH. So that's the kind of brain's communication to the thyroid, but then we also want to see how the thyroid's communicating to the rest of the body. So we want to see a free T4, a free T3, and then TPO and TG antibodies. So we also want to see the immune system's interaction in the thyroid, and really getting a better idea as to where your unique body is in that kind of healing. Starting with the fundamentals there are, again, going to be so important, particularly just in repleting of nutrients and calories and all of those pieces.
I could not agree more. And the postpartum period is it's tough. It's challenging. Like Abby's describing, there's a lot of things that, are not in your control always, in terms of, sleep disruptions and things like that. But, across the board, and I could say this about a variety of, kind of women's health issues or, kind of phases of the life cycle, but the postpartum period is something that is drastically undersupported in our healthcare system in the United States. It's really bad, honestly. And women are left with not a lot of support. And so I love what Abby's describing around almost put a plan in place before giving birth so that you can advocate for yourself. You can have conversations before that even happens. And I just think being proactive is a really great way to approach things. And I think the more we have these conversations, the more women can do that for themselves and be armed with, what to ask for and, how to support themselves. But I will just say, kind of personally in my practice, I have really recently actually seen an uptick with, postpartum thyroiditis going unchecked by conventional providers, and women seeking out support from me and my dietitian colleague Courtney in our practice for help, because they're like, what the heck is going on with my body? This actually just happened with a couple clients recently, and one specifically that was feeling pretty good, for the first 4 to 6 months postpartum, and then all of a sudden started to rapidly see increases or shifts with weight. So she was gaining weight. She was experiencing extreme anxiety. She was losing her hair, really, really inflamed, lots of bloating, sleep disruption, back pain, sought out care from her PCP, who she fought, tooth and nail to basically run a TSH and some basic blood labs, and was told you're fine. Get more rest, stress less, which is like, makes our heads want to explode. And this client, sought out support, and we ended up, doing more extensive lab testing, a full thyroid panel included, and both her, TPO and TG antibodies were through the roof. They were really, really elevated, meaning there is a lot of, inflammation and immune involvement happening with this thyroid dynamic. The immune system is angry, really. And there was a lot of other things coming up in her labs too, in terms of, gut issues and, cortisol being all over the place. And she had some good basics in place, but even with just kind of fine tuning those things, we saw some pretty immediate improvements. So we kept, keeping it really simple as a new mom. But when she brought her labs to share with her provider, they basically said, oh yeah, you do have, postpartum thyroiditis, but you're like sort of at that, 1 year mark. So we're not going to necessarily acknowledge it because you're outside of that, 1 year postpartum window almost. And your TSH doesn't look shitty enough in order for us to provide you medication. So let's wait until there's full blown, disease of the thyroid gland that we cannot reverse anything. And, we're going to, you're going to need medication. So anyway, we always like to support continuity of care and communicating with providers. And unfortunately, this client's provider's response was really disappointing. But we have been using this information to get to work and support her body and try to, put these things into remission, to calm the immune system down, to support the thyroid, to prioritize safety in the body. And, without any, medications, we're already seeing really, really drastic improvements with all of her symptoms, honestly, across the board, which is wonderful. And it's really hard when women are expected to just navigate this on their own. And I just think we need more conversations around this postpartum period, because this is clearly very common. And there are so many things that we can do to, help women navigate this period of time before there's a full-blown disease state.
Yeah, I think trust when you don't feel right in your body, even if there, is a provider that's telling you, and it all comes down to like semantics. It's like, well, you're out of the, when we split the hairs on the dates and all of these things, you're not sick enough for us to pay attention to you, is essentially what she was told. So come back when you're sicker. And, the laundry list of clients that you and I have had that weren't sick enough to get the type of care, and quite frankly, did the providers have the tools to help them, is, a whole nother conversation. But it's a very unfortunate common conversation, that, people are having. And, so that piece of advocating for yourself, even when it feels really, really uncomfortable and it feels like you're being, dismissed, that, it's worth it. You are worth it.
I couldn't agree more. And hopefully, this is empowering for anyone listening that might be struggling in that, kind of period of time postpartum, or just really in any setting with their health at any period of time. I just want to echo what Abby said in terms of you are worth it. Keep at it, keep advocating for yourself, and find the right provider who's going to listen and support you in doing that deeper investigative work. Our next question is, how long does it typically take for those with PCOS to see full healing results? Is there a chance that doing everything to heal your PCOS doesn't work? Everyone's timeline is different. And this is another thing that we could really apply more broadly to IBS, to a variety of, different symptoms people deal with or health conditions or dynamics. But specific to PCOS in this question, everyone's timeline is different, and PCOS manifests differently in each individual. This is why we are always emphasizing that it is so important not to compare yourself to other people, other people's journeys. There's just, kind of so much wrapped up in what an individual is experiencing and their response to interventions. We have to consider the underlying dynamics that are creating symptoms and dysfunction in the first place, the severity of a person's symptoms, what their diet looks like, sleep, stress, their schedule, movement, their environmental exposures, so many things. What I would typically tell clients is that if you are doing the right things to support your body and to support your specific, PCOS root causes, there will likely be, or there should be rather, some symptoms that we do see more immediate benefits with over the course of, a few weeks or a few months, if we're kind of supporting the body with the right things. There are other symptoms and goals that you may have that will take much longer to achieve. But ideally, we do want to see small incremental shifts or improvements, even if they are subtle. So we want to see progress over time. And sometimes, when we're in the thick of things, these improvements can be so subtle that it's hard to notice until we do a little bit of reflection. And I also want to point out that amongst seeing good incremental progress, there can also be setbacks or things that maybe aren't improving as quickly as we would like. And that's also okay. But we do want to be, receiving information or signs from the body that we are moving in the right direction. And when I mentioned that there are some things we might see immediate benefits with, these are often things like, energy, sleep, mood, digestion, how we're feeling after meals, sometimes, again, depending on the root causes, but sometimes, improvements with skin. So there's lots of things that we can see immediate benefits with. And this will, kind of vary based off the individual as well. But just know that it's also very normal if it takes longer to see things move, especially if there are, kind of bigger goals and dynamics that we are addressing. Especially when it comes to things like the gut and hormones, you could be doing all the right things, but these dynamics aren't going to, shift and correct overnight. So we have to support the body with the right things consistently over time. A good guideline, in my opinion, just generally would be that if you are making targeted, dietary and lifestyle changes for 3 months, we should start to see some, shifts and improvements. If we are not seeing any improvements or movement at that point, that would be just a great opportunity to reevaluate and say, hey, what am I missing here? Am I really supporting the right things? Am I targeting something that I saw someone else doing and maybe it's not actually relevant and supportive for me? So I would say give something 3 months and be consistent and then, reevaluate at the end of the 3 months. And if there's big question marks, then we dive in and we, dig deeper to understand kind of what we're missing. And to speak to the last part of that question, I do not believe that there is a chance that you do everything, possible to support your body and it doesn't work for just you and you see no improvements with your PCOS or IBS or whatever it is. I just do not believe that is possible. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that too, Abby. Because in my mind, that means you probably have not found the right support. We probably don't have a clear understanding of what dynamics are driving symptoms for you. And we don't have a good supportive, kind of customized plan to support those things. Or maybe we just need to make some adjustments to make sure that your body is well supported in this process. But I think if there's no movement at all and you're not seeing results over time, then we have to ask questions. We don't give up.
I would I completely agree with everything that you said there. Um, there's no time in Jilly or my practice where we just are like, oh, well, that's all that we can do. So, have a great life. Like that's not ever a conversation between us and any of our clients. It's
Never.
more a reflection of curiosity of like, all right, let's like, what are we missing? We comb back through the information that we do have. We ask more questions. We get creative about our questions. We like double down on, hey, did we miss some of the fundamentals? Are we really making sure that these are translating into your everyday life and like really going through, because there are reasons for why the body's experiencing symptoms. It's not just that the body's decided to like hate you and break down and like do all of these things that we might believe that's what's happening, but there are always reasons for it, and therefore there are always things that we can invite in to better support. I'm just gonna go into the thoughts behind the short term.
Okay.
Do we want to do the 3 green one? Okay. Kind of
Nah.
so.
Okay, good.
So our next question actually builds kind of right on that, or maybe complements thoughts or reasons behind short-term relief. So I think what this question is really asking is maybe about why someone might experience some short-term relief from trying something new, but then after some time, maybe their symptoms come back or the benefit might wear off, or they don't get full relief of their symptoms. I think that's maybe what this question is asking. And generally, this is because there's some like deeper work to be done for that person, identifying and supporting maybe the root cause, if there's like a symptom or dynamic in the body, versus just using like a supplement to try to kind of address the immediate symptoms. And that kind of brings back to that deeper work of, again, are the fundamentals being supported? Because sometimes when we're getting immediate relief from a supplement or from like one inclusion of a behavior or a focus, we can think like, oh, this is the solution. This is the only thing that I need to do to get, to the other side of XYZ symptom, when, we might get some success there, but it might wane, or we might not get the full way there because either we're overlooking some of the fundamentals, or maybe there's some other pieces of the equation that we need to maybe do some deeper work around. So there could be some, symptoms that are a little quote unquote easier in a sense to remedy versus others that again need longer work, kind of very much what Jillian was just talking about. So, a simple example in the digestive health world can be supplements that are, great for immediate relief, such as like digestive enzymes, can be really helpful to alleviate symptoms after eating. But long-term relief, we really need to be asking kind of the question of like, why was this person's digestive enzymes low in the first place? Because there was a reason for that. So, is it some of the fundamentals, like their eating behaviors, their sleep, their hydration, their stress, because all of those can impact digestion. And this is where we're kind of getting more insight into that person's unique body. And maybe we do need some testing, and we do want a trained provider to help us to interpret those testings so that we can really create a cohesive kind of protocol that's going to complement a lot of that fundamentals. So we always believe that, supplements are really impactful, but they should more be like the cherry on top and some of the kind of support pieces to that really fundamental approach should really be like the, the bread and butter of, a couple different metaphors there, I suppose, to that like protocol.
Amen. I love it. All the metaphors for this one. And I could not agree more. And this applies specifically to what I was just talking about with the high DHT and the androgenic symptoms that some women will experience, where we can use supplements that block this 5-alpha reductase enzyme that we're talking about. But if we're not also doing the deeper root cause investigative work and supporting the fundamentals, so the inflammation, the blood sugar issues, the stress, then the second we stop that supplement, all of those symptoms are likely going to flare in a big way. And we may even see, really a limit in terms of how much progress we can make with just using, a supplement. We might get a little bit of relief or support, but if we're not doing that, kind of deeper work, then we're not going to get full, remission with the symptoms, and we're just going to feel reliant on whatever X supplement is. So I think, again, you could kind of apply this to so many different things. So next up, we have how to increase progesterone and estrogen levels. Estrogen and progesterone being two of our primary sex hormones as women. So this is a very, very loaded question that we could probably and will probably do an entire episode on at some point. I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet because I think I would be doing a disservice to you if I tried to get too into the weeds with this in, just with answering this Q&A. But I do want to mention that when it comes to these sex hormones, so estrogen and progesterone, these are age dependent in women. So they're impacted by how old we are, what phase of life we're in. They're also impacted by things like, medications, certain, health conditions. So I would always want to understand the full context of what was going on with an individual in terms of making any recommendations around, trying to increase progesterone and estrogen. And I would also want to have, some good lab data to assess and look at before making any specific recommendations. But in general, in women of reproductive age, we often see low levels of estrogen and progesterone due to stress. Surprise, surprise. So this could be emotional stress. Stress from, relationships and your job and the never ending to-do list. Or it could also be physical stressors, which we see often and, covered in the nervous system stress episode of the podcast in a lot of depth in terms of talking about the different types of stressors. So physical stressors that can reduce the production of sex hormones include things like under-eating calories, carbs, protein, fat. So if we don't have, enough raw materials and energy to actually produce hormones, then that could be a big issue at its core. And I will say too, that when it comes to, women of reproductive age, when the body is under stress, typically, that's one of the sooner things to go when, the body doesn't feel safe. We could also be experiencing physical stress from things like overexercising, a lack of sleep or disrupted sleep, and even specific nutrient deficiencies. So as an example, we know that a lack of B vitamins like B6 specifically, vitamin C, zinc, and magnesium are all associated with low progesterone levels. So just to give you a few examples, one other thing I'll mention that is a big deal when it comes to hormone production, but I won't get into the weeds and Abby and I will, I'm sure, cover this at some point, but the health of your mitochondria. So mitochondria and mitochondria function play a big role in sex hormone production. So lots of things that could impact, estrogen and progesterone. And like with all of the other things we're talking about, start with the fundamentals first, because that is where we see the biggest gaps impacting hormone production and hormone levels.
We've got a whole episode on stress.
And, cover the fundamentals. And then again, ultimately, we're going to need to understand why you are not producing enough of these hormones if, you're doing all those things and we're scratching our head and hormone production is still low.
All right. And our last question is how to improve steatorrhea without relying on bile supplements. So steatorrhea is maldigestion of fat. Meaning someone is not appropriately digesting fat and it's coming out in the stool. So we're missing the absorption of some of our healthy fats, an easier way to say it. Often this can look like, from a symptom standpoint, it can look like pale stools or loose stools that are pale in color. They could be orange or chalk colored. They could be frothy, floating, oily looking. For someone who doesn't digest fat well, they might also experience nausea or burping after a higher fat meal, dry or itchy skin. So it can show itself in kind of other ways. It sounds like this person already knows that they are someone that had an elevated steatorrhea. So the main area we want to be focusing on would be drainage and the dynamics that are impacting their gallbladder and bile flow. That's part of our drainage system. We went into more detail on kind of bile support in both our detox and drainage episodes, as well as our functional food episodes. So tune in there, especially around bitter foods and some of those foods to incorporate. But a couple of things that we'd want to consider that can kind of reduce bile flow or congest bile flow is what I like to say, from the gallbladder, and that can contribute to that malabsorption of fat can be synthetic estrogens in birth control and hormonal medications, the peri and postmenopausal kind of hormonal shifts and the estrogens and the fluctuations in those hormones that are present in those periods of life. Thyroid issues and the role that it plays in kind of gallbladder contractions, blood sugar issues and high insulin. So if any of these are relevant to you, they can give more insight into what might be some of the contributing factors that might be leading to that kind of congestion in bile or lack of gallbladder contractions, leading to that malabsorption of fat. So it can help us to better understand, like, how might we support that individual to get their gallbladder working a little more functionally, get their bile flowing. We ultimately want that. Save the gallbladders. Let's start the hashtag there. Save all the gallbladders. It's one of the most common surgeries in our country to remove gallbladders. We want to keep it as much as we can. And I know that there will be a whole gallbladder bile episode. But bile salts can be helpful. But we also want to make sure that we're doing the other fundamentals to optimize gallbladder function and bile flow. So, what is bile made out of? How do we keep it flowy from this, kind of honey consistency that's more sludgy to this like watery maple syrup? Hydration, minerals. Fundamentally, bile's 98% water. So we need to be hydrated. Movement, actually physical movement, helps to contract the gallbladder. So we want to be making sure that we're moving our body and kind of Goldilocks, not too much, not too little. Bitter foods, which again, we went into more in depth on earlier episodes. And then some other more specific nutrients that can help to support the kind of gallbladder contractions and bile flow. Ginger, curcumin, or that's turmeric. That's kind of the active nutrient in turmeric. Green tea, and coffee. Actually, coffee is a great bitter food. We do want it to be bitter when we consume it. So all that kind of, if we have like sugar and creamer, which like I'm totally guilty of when I have coffee, we do want the bitter flavor of it because that's what's going to trigger those kind of bitter receptors. So if you're trialing all of these suggestions and you aren't able to reduce the need for bile salts, it might be helpful to work with a provider to, understand what might else be going on. Someone that, like myself or Jillian, that does, a lot of work in that kind of functional field and really looking and caring about the gallbladder. Because again, hashtag save the gallbladders.
Save the gallbladders. We love gallbladders.
I'm going to make some signs.
I feel like this is going to be the biggest new trend on social media. This hashtag.
It should be.
It's going to take off like wildfire. I can feel it.
Well, all right, all. So that's a wrap. That's the questions that we got for this episode. As we shared at the beginning, we got a wealth of questions that were all so awesome. We didn't get to all of them today. So if you submitted a question and you're like, what, are they ignoring me? We're not ignoring you. We're already building episode 2. We do need some more questions from you all, or we're going to open up some Q&A opportunities on Instagram. So keep an eye there because we want to hear what you want to learn from us about and what your kind of burning gut and hormone questions are.
Yes, we love it. We love answering your questions. And if you like this type of episode, let us know. DM us on Instagram, give us your questions and let us know if you do find these helpful because we'll keep doing them. Thank you so much for joining us and we will see you in the next episode.